Hi, I'm Steve Brand. I remember being little and playing some old vinyl records my grandparents had. These records were really thick ones that you really couldn't bend like the ones today, like this, for example. And I always enjoyed doing that for some reason. I don't know. I was a kid. I was a weirdo. But something that left a big impression on me about vinyl records was how they sounded. The music that came from them was so crisp but also warm at the same time and sounding real. And as a kid, cassettes were the big medium everyone played their music on, mainly due to the popularity of the Sony Walkman at the time. But cassettes sounded okay, but you could hear the waviness in the sound, and sometimes if the player didn't play at the right speed, you can hear the weird effect that it had on the music. Even at a young age, my ear liked the sound of records better. As I grew up, nothing had changed. I'd always liked the sound of records better. Especially when CDs became popular. CDs to me were too clean, too perfect, but some things didn't sound right. Cymbal crashes to me sounded funny. They had this strange effect on them, like phasing effect, that wasn't there in vinyl form. My love for vinyl records is what led to the topic of my speech, which is vinyl records are the best medium used to listen to music on. I'm going to talk to you a little about some of the history of vinyl records, then how vinyl is different from other medium formats, and then finally, I'll talk to you about why I feel vinyl records are better. Maybe in the end of my speech, you'll be enlightened on a little bit more about vinyl records, and maybe get you to try vinyl records for yourself. So let me start with talking a little bit about the history of vinyl records. Scientific American states that the human ear was the inspiration for the first audio recording device, invented in 1857 by Edward Leon Scott de Martinville. The machine was called the phonautograph. A horn played the role of an ear canal, taking air down a thin piece of parchment. Like the eardrum, the parchment oscillated with vibrating air when vibrating air passed by it. Now, in 1887, Thomas Edison invented the phonograph, which played wax cylinders uh, that had a needle that would be placed in a groove, which was the recorded sound etched into the wax cylinder. This is very similar to records today, except records today are flat discs made of vinyl. Now, according to Yale University Library website, 78 or 78 RPM records that were popular around World War II were made of shellac. During and after World War II, when shellac supplies were limited, 78 RPM records were pressed in vinyl. This led to vinyl becoming a dominant medium to make records in. Records evolved through years with different RPM speeds introduced, like 45 RPM and 33 RPMs. The reason for the different speeds that the records needed to spin in is for quality of sound and how long it could play. Electrohome.com says that the slower a record turns, the worse the audio sounds. Due to this, in order to provide the best sound possible, the record needs to spin or turn faster. However, when the record turns faster, the amount of information it can hold is reduced, thus having a shorter playtime. All right, now that I've talked a little bit about the history of vinyl record, I'd like to talk to you about how vinyl records are different from other medium or other audio platforms. I'm sure many of you are aware of other platforms that are available to listen to music on, like cassette, compact disc, MP3s, and streaming over the internet. And if you're old enough, you probably remember 8-track tapes. Let me start with CDs. According to electronics.howstuffworks.com, a vinyl record is an analog recording and CDs are digital recordings. Analog, as defined by Merriam-Webster, is of, related to, or being a mechanism or device in which information is represented by continuous variable physical quantities. So the needle makes continuous contact with the record, and the needle vibrates by the physical representation of the sound that was recorded in the vinyl. CDs hold digital code that is read by a laser and decoded by a player. Electronics.howstuffworks.com continues to state that a digital recording makes snapshots of analog signals at a certain rate. For CDs, it's 44,100 times per second and measures each snapshot with a certain accuracy. For CDs, it is 16-bit, which means the value must be one of 65,536 possible values. Lots of sciencey stuff here. This means that, by definition, a digital recording is not capable of capturing the complete sound wave. It is approximating it with a series of steps. Some sounds that have very quick transitions, such as drum beats or trumpet tones, will be distorted because they change too quickly for the sample rate. That is why drum cymbals can sound like they have this weird phasing effect on them. I had heard an interview with Neil Young one time, who is a huge proponent of high definition recordings, say that the code for the digital recordings, or the algorithm, was made incorrectly. It didn't allow for the full spectrum sound to be interpreted. CDs do allow for more data to be played, as to where MP3s, for example, have less data, so they can be sent over data networks and or like over sharing online or streaming, make that easier. Any recordings on tape is still considered an analog source, but planetoftunes.com says the cheaper analog tape recorders suffer from distortion, crosstalk, wow flutter, high levels of tape noise like hiss. Expensive ones do this to a lesser extent, but it still happens. It goes on to say that tape is expensive and is vulnerable to deterioration. All right, now, so I've talked to you about a little bit about the history of vinyl records and how vinyl records are different from other medium options. Now I'd like to talk to you about my final point, which is why I feel vinyl records are better. Now, this can be a very subjective argument, one that I've had with people many times. A lot of it, I think, just depends on what your ear likes. People like myself, or audiophiles, as some people call us, tend to be on the same train of thought that vinyl is better. Audiophiles, by the way, as defined by Merriam-Webster, is a person who is enthusiastic about the high-fidelity sound reproduction. In my point earlier, I talked about some of the downsides of CDs, digital recordings, and tape recordings, but there are those things to consider when deciding what medium is superior to another. There are some people that say there are downsides to vinyl records, like there is no way you can reproduce a high-res stereo mix, but I feel differently. I definitely feel differently. When I like to relax, one of my favorite records to listen to is Led Zeppelin 4. I will put on my very expensive studio quality headphones and listen to Stairway to Heaven. I will close my eyes, and through the sound I could hear the guitarist Jimmy Page's guitar pick hit each individual string, how the pick stops the string from vibrating as it strikes the string to the next, strike the string to play the next note. I can even hear how Jimmy's fingertips may not have played a note just right to where it may be a bit muted or make the strings vibrate awkwardly on the guitar fret. I can listen to the exact song on the same headphones through the same stereo, and some of the nuances are missing when I listen to it on digital, like MP3 or even on CD. Seems like those frequencies aren't even there in the digital form. This may seem a little nitpicky, but I think that this is stuff that makes music feel alive and human. Everything today is being recorded directly to digital, and I feel it makes the music feel sterile or too perfect. That's why you hear many recording artists say they want to record on analog. Like Foo Fighters, for example, was a great example. They did a recent album completely on tape, on analog tape, but this is high resolution analog tape. That's how things were done quite a bit before digital recordings really became the mainstream. Now, it seems that there's a lot of people starting to come back to analog, which is great, or back to records in particular. According to Billboard.com, vinyl album sales reached 14.32 million in 2017, a record high number since Nielsen started tracking the sales in 1991. This is the 12th year in a row vinyl sales have increased, jumping 9% from 2016. So, sounds like a lot of people are coming back, which is great. So, in closing, I've talked a little bit about the history of vinyl records, a little on how vinyl is different from other medium options, and I talked about how vinyl records are better. Again, one can say that opinion of whether vinyl records are better is purely subjective. But for me, especially since I've recorded my own music semi-professionally, and I feel tone is a huge, huge element in music, vinyl is far superior. If you've not played a record in a while, revisit it. Check it out for yourself and even compare some of your favorite songs from digital to vinyl and see what you think. Maybe you'll become a vinyl convert as well. See you later.